Islamophobia. Nice, light-hearted, sort of discussion that you might see on Loose Women or This Morning. Just sort of, after you've made some lovely fairy cakes, it'd be the feature after that, wouldn't it? Islamophobia. Just segue straight into no fucking segue actually, just straight in. Go. Well, these cakes are lovely. Islamophobia, is it bad? It says yes, Islamophobia is a type of racism. Here's why, by Res Streeting. Contrary to myth, the definition I helped devise isn't a threat to free speech. Theresa May's government must adopt it. Now, I don't know who Wes Streeting is exactly, but he's making some bold claims there, because many people would dispute this. But I've done a bit of research. Yeah, I actually thought I'd do some research for once. Usually on these things, I just going straight in with what I know, just for the fucking jokes of it, really. But this paints a bigger picture, because it's, as far as I'm concerned, Islamophobia is a real thing, but I have my own my own take on it, and it's deeper than anyone else's, right? So on March the 15th, gunman walked into the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch. Yes, we know about all this. We know. Hatred against Muslims does not begin with the sound of gunfire breaking through the peaceful calm of a place of prayer. It's good with his words, isn't he? It begins with simple prejudice in our schools, our workplaces, and our communities. More than 20 years since the Runnymede Trust publicised its seminal report, Islamophobia, a challenge for us all, it is on the rise. The all-party parliamentary group on British Muslims, which I lead with Anna Soubry, isn't that the woman they were shouting Nazi at? Is that her? Is determined to meet the challenge. That's why we have produced a report establishing, for the first time, a working definition of Islamophobia. For the first time. It was clear from the evidence we gathered, including powerful testimony from the victims of Islamophobia, that what we're up against goes wider than anti-Muslim hatred. It is structural, often unconscious bias. So we argue that Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. We've produced. I was praising your writing a second ago. A series of examples modeled on the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism to help people understand how this manifests. The attempted murder of a Muslim woman and a 12-year-old daughter as revenge for the Parsons Green terror attack. The torture of a Muslim convert by two women in Guisborough, while they shouted, "We don't like Muslims over here," and the Muslim mother attacked for wearing a hijab on the way to collect her children from primary school in London. The Punish a Muslim Day letters sent to Muslim institutions, and prominent Muslim figures, the racist in Northern Ireland who left a pig's head on the door of the mosque they had graffitied, the motorists forking out £1,000 more to insure their car if their name is Mohammed, the Social Mobility Commission's findings of conscious and unconscious bias against Muslims in the employment market, the Islamophobic abuse hurled at people who aren't even Muslim because their abusers couldn't tell the difference between, for example, a Sikh wearing a turban and a Muslim man, the men who tried bacon to the door handles of a mosque in Bristol. Now, with that point there, yes, this is something I've always had problems with over the years, is that you get a hell of a lot of morons. Look, most people are there's a high percentage of morons out there, and you do get them. You always get the comments going, "Oh, look, it's Muhammad over there. What if he's got a bomb?" And they're probably not Muslim, but the thing is, Islam is is a brown people religion by and large, although it is very widespread. But that's kind of the image that but the negative image, especially because I would say the attacks that that have affected us directly. You'd have, out here in Thailand, there's problems in the south with the Muslim community down there. They want their own separate state and blah 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 blah. But they're Thai. They look Thai, right? But that's not what you most of us as Westerners would see. Boko Haram, like you wouldn't see a bunch of Nigerians immediately go, terrorists. No, because we haven't had, that many attacks. I mean, obviously, well, we've had the two Nigerian boys who did the Rigby, and one of the 777 bombers was actually Jamaican. He was a convert. But by and large, majority of the attacks have come from people from, Southwest Asia and the Middle East. And some motherfuckers out there. And the majority of Muslims in the UK would be Pakistani and Bangladeshi, because they're like the biggest, the biggest minority in terms of Muslim minorities. You see what I'm saying? That's why you get this moronic thing, because it's but it's not. But to I want to look at all sides. It's this. All right, I'll just break it down to exactly what I think about what Islamophobia is, and I'll also show you where the term comes from, because there's a lot of differing opinions on Islamophobia depending on which political leanings you have. All right. For me, Islamophobia was created by the media in the first place, was stirred up by the media and the government to a certain extent. What you have post 9/11 is a situation where the terrorism is based on fear. That is its prime objective, and fear will control you. And so many incidents after 9/11. I mean, Islamophobia isn't just the fear. This is my fear. It's not just the fear of like being bombed or beheaded or whatever it is, or being a victim of a terrorist attack. Islamophobia is way wider spread than you would possibly imagine. As in, a phobia is a fear, okay? It's not a hatred, it's a fear. So if you call something Islamophobia, you're talking about a fear. If you're talking about actual hatred, then that's different. Racism is different. These are different things between fear and hatred, okay? To actually hate them is different to fearing them. And if you're talking about actual phobia, fear, then hell of a lot of people have that phobia. And I'll tell you why. Because you think about outrage culture that we have now, where so many people are offended all the time and everyone's triggered and all this stuff. Like, you can't say nothing no more. But after 9/11, a huge microscope was put on the Muslim world, and not many people didn't know that much about Islam, and suddenly everyone knows a lot more about Islam, and therefore all the great things about Islam were not focused on, obviously, because we're talking about a fear machine here. It's a fear machine. Like terrorists and the media work sort of hand in hand, but not like they communicate with each other. They just do, because it both serves a purpose for them. Like being scared is very popular. That's why horror films exist. The thing is, all the sort of dark and not cool things about Islam and Islamic nations and regimes and interpretations of Islam sort of came to the surface and were just fiercely scrutinized and talked about a hell of a lot. And it came a realization that there was a very big problem within Islam, and the fact is that they're very easily offended. Now, we should have known this way back when Salman Rushdie had a fatwa put out on him just for writing a book. But back then it was a different world. But after 9/11, you look at Charlie. Just two great examples is the Danish cartoon of Muhammad and Charlie Hebdo. The Danish cartoon was a fierce reaction, but Charlie Hebdo was insane, was mental, and there's way more incidents to talk about. As in, it reached a point where it's like if you say something that offends them, they go fucking ape shit. I'm not talking about all Muslims, but I'm saying there's a very vocal, loony, fucking crazy majority. You're not talking about like getting deplatformed or having your TV show cancelled. We're talking about being fucking murdered here. Murdered for daring to offend someone. And I truly believe this, because I could see this in myself, is that it came to a point where these people who sort of act like they're do-gooders, saying, oh, you shouldn't say that about Muslims, it's cruel, 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 it's mean, it's mean, it's mean, are scared that, I think that they've been fully seduced by the fear machine. They're scared themselves. They are fearful too. They don't want to call it. We don't want no trouble here. We don't want no trouble here. This is a local shop for local people. No trouble here. So they don't want to speak out, and they don't want other people speaking out. This is my fear. And I think if a lot of people look deep down inside themselves, they realize that they're probably more scared than they are emphatic. Being, there's more fear than empathy in there. I just believe that. I truly believe that. And I think the way people react now when people are very vocal against Islam, number one, Tommy Robinson, but then a hell of a lot of people who are way more sort of, haven't got the sort of same public image and reputation as Tommy Robinson, will get ostracized for even daring to sort of comment on Islam or anything like that. And I genuinely think that the majority of the people, like slamming these people for calling out Islam and for critiquing it, are more scared and are more like, oh well, they won't come after me because I'm with them. Yes, him, get him. That seems to be the attitude. It's like, oh, it wasn't me, it was him. It was that whole thing, like just ratting people and saving your own skin. And it's weird because the political movement that sort of fully supports Islam and has taken them under their wing as their little pets is socialists. It's this new breed of socialists, or this old breed of socialists. I don't know whether suddenly they just started springing out the floor like fucking gremlins. But and it's my theory that, well, it's not really theory. It's kind of just, there's evidence there. It's like socialism has socialism has a strong history with ratting out people in order to save your own fucking skin. The state, the beloved state, and the communist utopia comes above your family. You sell out your brothers, you sell out your sisters, you sell out your mother, you sell out your father, you sell out your children, you sell out your lovers, your wives, your husbands, your gramps, your grandma, your fucking dog would get it. So that kind of mentality sort of goes hand in hand with the whole fearful thing of going, oh no, it was them, no, not me, I'm with you. Even if you had a problem with it. And that's why you sort of constantly see them not calling out, not saying it how it is and going, yo, like this, there's some messed up shit within certain aspects of Islam, certain cultures as well. And I think that Islamophobia, like I said, it's deeply lying in a hell of a lot of people, just people react to it differently. Whereas this, what they're talking about here, Islamophobia, punish a Muslim day, a lot of this is steeped in fear because, like I said, I kept telling people this. You can't go around calling these people racists. That's number one. I said this years ago. I said this to a guy who works trying to stop people from, a think tank to stop people from being radicalized by the far right. So, well, the number one thing is you don't call them racists and push and just ignore what they have to say. That's wrong. And this is why I, started seeing, like, there was a new enemy. Like, the far right is not the threat out there. This other lunacy that's out there. This is more of a threat than fucking Islam. Is this left wing lunacy that you keep seeing. And it's like, it's a billion strong religion. So, if everyone was problematic, we'd have some fucking problems going on, right? But the fact is, you can't keep calling them racist when all they've known, you've got people who will be 18 now, adults or younger. Like, what was your life like before you were 6 or 7? Do you know what I mean? your worldview gets shaped more as you get older. There's some people who will not even be able to comprehend what a pre-9/11 existence was like. And I always say this. And, the constant fear machine that was out there, the amount of, it's not just the terrorist plots that happened, the ones that got foiled, the daily reports from Iraq about suicide bombing after suicide bombing after suicide bombing. And that's just Iraq, let alone all the other fucking places. ISIS, who are just always in the news. One of the most terrifying things, like ISIS are coming. Fucking terrifying. And what did the media do? The media were complicit. The media helped push their fucking propaganda because they don't know no better. The fear, they rinse the fear machine. They love the fear machine. The fear machine makes them so much money. The fear machine keeps them relevant, the media. And you've got all these fear machines. Guardian's a fear machine. Daily Mail's a fear machine. They're all fucking fear machines. And to sort of look down on people who haven't thought things through, who don't know no better, who aren't really that, not many people out there are great researchers or that knowledgeable or that well educated. Like even people who go to universities in the UK aren't very well educated. That's fucking facts. Like you got to educate yourself. And the fact is that this fear machine is pushed into their brains, and this is why you get this kind of bullshit, because they don't know no better. They just know little bits, and the only little bits that they know about a culture is fucking terrifying. And whose fault is that? It's not Tommy Robinson's fault. It's not Britain First's fault. It's not the BNP's fault. It's the fucking media and the government that pretty much helped this along. The media are responsible for this way of thinking, because that's where they get, you don't, everywhere you go, you turn on the television, there's the fucking news. You pick up a news, there's newspapers everywhere. There's news everywhere, right? There's not some far right fucking activist or some member of Combat 18, like just springs out of everywhere, every workplace, every pub, just pops up and goes, "Hey, you fucking seen what the Muslims have been up to? Fucking bunch of cunts. They're dangerous. We need to eradicate them all. The fucking final solution is needed." No, there's not. There's not that many far right people out there. There's like mass. But this is what they try and tell you. It's like, they've been radicalised by the far right. The far right are getting them. They're spreading Islam. Where are these? There's not like some office you fucking walk into and just go, "Oh, is this the far?" Yeah, I just want to learn how to hate the other, please. I want to know how to be fearful of the foreigner. It's not how it fucking works, and you know it isn't. You're not sat in the job centre and some far right guy just walking in and going, "Yeah, take this leaflet, fucking right, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna clobber some Muslims tonight." No, it's all in their fucking newspapers. This is what will send people fucking potty. Jesus Christ. It's pathetic. And like I said, and that's what it is. You can't constantly have all these reports of fearful things and also have the police come forward when they have totally fucked up massive rape investigations of an unbelievable amount of girls getting raped by these Muslim gangs. And the police come forward saying, we were too afraid of being labelled racist. Like, that's what, the police are fearful now? The police are sucking into the fear machine? What the fuck? Come on. No, this is totally fucked. And by giving Muslims a pass now, which is what's happening, of just sort of ignoring the things that go on that don't really conform to our way of thinking. Kind of sounds a bit bad, doesn't it? But you know what I'm saying. And by propping them up, and by wrapping them in this cotton wool, that pushes people further and further into the grips of darkness, as it is. So this is a mess created not by this mess was created by a number of different sources, but most of them in the media. That's what I'd fucking say. More so than the terrorists themselves. Who would have thought? Punish a Muslim day and putting a pig's head outside a mosque. This is the behaviour of morons. This is behaviour of morons, but what else could you say? And I think, yeah, definitely, if you definitely have a bit more racist tendencies, then you will hate Muslims more in a different way because of the generalization of the colour of a Muslim skin. But I think when you're talking about more high-profile figures, who generally, say like your Sam Harris or someone like that, who are genuinely talking about why they have issue with Islam and why they think it's concerning, they're not racists. They generally think about ideology and don't like it because they'll criticize all kinds of ideologies. That's kind of the difference going on here than your average moron who thinks a Sikh's a fucking Muslim and throws bacon at them. That dude's just a fucking everyday moron. What are you gonna do? Execute all the morons? There'll be no one left to do all the crap jobs. Anyway, let's have a look at the. Yeah, that's my 50 cents there. We toured the length and breadth of the country, engaging extensive consultation with Muslim communities, academics, lawyers, police officers, public services, civil society leaders and politicians. As a result of this, our definition already had widespread backing, including from more than 750 British Muslim organisations. So they just consult with Muslims. I guess that's what you do, but I don't know. Shouldn't you consult with other people too? I don't know. Including the Muslim Council of Britain and the Muslim Women's Network and British Muslims for Secular Democracy. They all sound like really fun organisations. As well as the First Minister of Scotland, the Mayor of London, and the local authorities across the country. So it's particularly disappointing to see a noisy chorus of vocal opposition making arguments in bad faith that accuse us of trying to use the term Islamophobia to shut down criticism of Islam and introduce blasphemy laws by the back door. In fact, our report makes it crystal clear our definition does not preclude criticism of Islam or Islamic theology. God, if you believe in such a thing, doesn't need protection from criticism. Well, tell that to all the people that go after people. I mean, I'd have to see the whole thing. But I tell you some of the problems that you get with when they make these sort of definitions. It's like with the Anti-Defamation League, and what constitutes anti-Semitism now has actually been changed. They've added stuff to it, whereas even criticisms of Israel is anti-Semitism. And if you actually look at it, the changes, and you look at what a lot of high-profile people say, it's like they're being anti-Semitic without really knowing they're being anti-Semitic, because a few years ago that wasn't considered anti-Semitic. Do you see what I'm saying? And at the same time, so when they introduced new definitions of anti-Semitism, added to it, funny enough, at the same time, there was a rise in anti-Semitic crimes across Europe. More incidences of anti-Semitism. It was like oh, anti-Semitism is going up. It's like, well, no, you've added more crimes, so therefore yes, it will. In the last Labour government in 1 year introduced something like 3,200 new crimes, just created new offences that you could get arrested for and prosecuted for. 3,200. How the fuck did they come up with that? And why did they come up with that? And what happens? Well, the crime rate rises, obviously, because now suddenly you're doing something that wasn't a crime yesterday, is a crime today. How are you going to keep up to date with 3,200 new crimes? That's a hell of a lot of new crimes that you might be committing. I mean, how long is it going to take you to learn all those? I have watched with some amazement and even greater despair the Conservative Party making exactly the same mistakes over Islamophobia within their own party as the Labour Party has with anti-Semitism. The dismissal, denial and delegitimization of serious concerns raised by prominent Muslims about racism within their ranks. Theresa May could have followed the head of the Scottish Conservative leader Ruth Davidson in backing this definition, and by so doing left a powerful legacy to detoxify her party and improve the lives of Muslims across the country. Instead, with a remarkable lack of self-awareness and humility, the party that has so spectacularly failed British Muslims now intends to produce a government definition. Its abject failure to understand and tackle Islamophobia within its own ranks suggests it has neither the wisdom nor the credibility to do so. Alright, okay, so here we go. The government want to have their own definition of Islamophobia. This geezer and his think tank, or whatever it is, and his organisation, have their own definition of Islamophobia. This is what I'm saying. When you create a term, but like one side, it's like how they try and redefine racism. It's like, all right, look, let's just forget about the whole thing. It's just people being dickheads, isn't it? Like at the end of the day, like I've just given you my own definition of what Islamophobia is, which is the fear of Muslims, and it's not racism. It's just a fear that has been. So this, this person, all right, my interpretation of Islamophobia is way more accurate than yours. Kind of sounds like how the Shiites and the Sunnis argue about, our prophet. No, he was. Well, our version of Christianity is better than yours. Like, do you see what I'm saying? This is ideology. That's ideology. It's ideology. Conflict is one person's ideology of what Islamophobia is, having a go at the government because they got a different definition. We say, well, no, it's my coin. It's like, okay, well, like, this is just and yet more conflict that is unnecessary. Great. Well, that's wonderful, isn't it? Fantastic. Thanks for all the hard work. Given that just over a year ago, government ministers denied that there was a need for any definition at all, I suppose we might consider the latest developments some sign of progress. But it is too slow and will not be tolerated. British Muslims deserve better, and this is, as the Runnymede Trust said again last year, a challenge for us all. So just over a year ago, government ministers denied that there was a need for any definition at all. Maybe there isn't, but maybe it's just like too much of a fucking ball ache, because you're talking about having to prosecute people because of something. I mean, when they just start labeling stuff. Like when you get labeled, there's nothing worse than being labeled. When I got diagnosed as dyslexic, suddenly that was like, defined who I was. And it totally changed my school life, because you had to go like special needs shit and all this, and it's just like, well, that's not who I am. So that's a weird example. Do you know what I mean? But look, Islamophobia, it wasn't just coined by these motherfuckers, alright? Okay, so have a look at this. So here we go. This is, so first you go on Wikipedia, and I have checked the sources. It's fine. Oh god, I'm going to have to make that very bloody. Oh, I'm moving everything around. Don't you just love watching this kind of unprofessionalism in real time? Is that turning you on? Is that okay? What I'll do is I'll make this bigger, and I'll get rid of that. There you go. Now everyone's happy. So one early used, cited as the term's first use is by the. So this is the history of the term Islamophobia. Okay, I've got a few sources. So it was first used by painter Alphonse Etienne Dinet, an Algerian intellectual Slimane Ben Ibrahim Algerian intellectual Slimane Ben Ibrahim in their 1918 biography of Islam's Prophet Muhammad. Writing in French, they used the term Islamophobie. Robin Richardson writes that in the English version of the book, the word was not translated as Islamophobia, but rather as feelings inimical to Islam. It's not quite as snappy, is it? Dahu Ezahouni has cited several other uses in French as early as 1910 and from 1912 to 1918. These early uses of the term did not, according to Christopher Allen, have the same meaning as in the contemporary usage, as they described a fear of Islam by liberal Muslims and Muslim feminists rather than a fear of or dislike hatred of Muslims by non-Muslims. On the other hand, Fernando Bravo Lopez argues that Dinet and Ibrahim Slimane's use of the term was as a criticism of overly hostile attitudes to Islam by a Belgian originalist, Henry Lamens, whose project they saw as a pseudo-scientific crusade in the hope of bringing Islam down once and for all. He also notes that an early definition of Islamophobia appears in the PhD thesis of Alain Quélien, a French colonial bureaucrat. For some, the Muslim is the natural and irreconcilable enemy of the Christian and the European. Islam is the negation of civilization, and barbarism, bad faith, and cruelty are the best one can expect from the Mohammedans. Furthermore, he notes that Quillian's work heavily on the work of French colonial department's 1902 to 06 administrator, who published a work in 1906 which to a great extent mirrors John Esposito's The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality. The first recorded use of the term in English, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, was in 1923 in an article in the Journal of Theological Studies. The term entered the common usage in the publication of the Runnymede Trust Report in 1997. Right. So Kofi Annan asserted in 2004 conference entitled Confronting Islamophobia that the word Islamophobia had to be coined in order to take account of increasingly widespread bigotry. So the first recorded use of the term in English was in 1923. And the term entered into the common usage with the publication of the Runnymede Trust Report in 1987. So, but that's their definition of Islamophobia, I suppose, not just the term. But also, look, identity politics. It has been suggested that Islamophobia is closely related to identity politics and gives its adherents the perceived benefit of constructing their identity in opposition to a negative, essentialized image of Muslims. This occurs in the form of self-righteousness, assignment of blame, and key identity markers. Davina Banda writes that the term cultural has become synonymous with the category of the ethnic or minority. It views culture as an entity that is highly abstracted from the practices of daily life and therefore represents the illusion that there exists a spirit of the people. This formulation leads to the homogenization of cultural identity and the ascription of particular values and proclivities onto minority cultural groups. She views this as an ontological trap that hinders the perception of culture as something materially situated in the living practices of the everyday, situated in time, space, and not based in abstract projections of what constitutes either a particular tradition or culture. So in some societies, Islamophobia has materialized due to the portrayal of Islam and Muslims as the national other, where exclusion and discrimination occurs on the basis of their religion and civilization, which differs from the national tradition, blah, blah, blah. Okay, right, so there's some history of it. But you will have probably also have heard mentioned by... heard this from some Israelis and others, that the Muslim Brotherhood coined the term Islamophobia as a weapon against as a way, or coined it, or maybe they've popularized it. But you will hear some people saying that they made up the term in order to sort of stifle any dissent against Islam. But there are things that suggest that is not the case. So here's like links to ideologies and so forth. But here's an article. Someone sort of it's from a few years ago. I thought this was okay. The New Republic. As far as I can see, is probably quite left-leaning. Now, so at the end of the 1970s, Iranian fundamentalists invented the term Islamophobia. So on the one hand, you got people saying, so this guy from the Runnymede Trust says he coined the term, and you got a bunch of sort of right-wing types saying that is the Muslim Brotherhood that coined the term. And then you got lots of different sources in Wikipedia saying, it was some Algerian artist and some fucking intellectual fucking over 100 years ago. Then you have this at the end. At the end of the 1970s, Iranian fundamentalists invented the term Islamophobia, formed in an analogy to xenophobia. The aim of this word was to declare Islam inviolate. Whoever crosses this border is deemed a racist. This term, which is worthy of totalitarian propaganda, is deliberately unspecific about whether it refers to a religion, a belief system, or its faithful adherents around the world. But Confessions has no more in common with race than it has with secular ideology. Muslims, like Christians, come from the Arab world, Africa, Asia, and Europe, just as Marxists, liberals, and anarchists come from, or came from, all over. In a democracy, no one is obliged to like religion, and until proved otherwise, they have the right to regard it as retrograde and deceptive. Whether you find it legitimate or absurd that some people regard Islam with suspicion, as they once did Catholicism, and reject its aggressive proselytism and claim in total truth, this has nothing to do with racism. The term Islamophobia serves a number of functions. It denies the reality of an Islamic offensive in Europe, all the better to justify it. It attacks secularism by equating it with fundamentalism. Above all, however, it wants to silence all those. I'll tell you, that's where I was. So all those Muslims who question the Quran, who demand equality of the sexes, who claim the right to renounce religion, and who want to practice their faith freely and without submitting to the dictates of the bearded and doctrinaire. It follows the young girls are stigmatized for not wearing the veil, as are the French, German, or English citizens of Maghrebi, Turkish, African, or Algerian origin who demand the right to religious indifference, the right not to believe in God, the right not to fast during Ramadan. Fingers are pointed at these renegades. They are delivered up to the wrath of their religious communities. Okay, so this is going off topic about what Islamophobia is. Alright, Islamophobia, that is the word itself, is meant to silence you. It has already silenced President Obama, hasn't it? He hasn't even spoken up for fellow Christians who in recent weeks have been victimized in Iraq, where maybe we will wave some sway. Egypt, our very expensive ally, Nigeria, Pakistan, it's out. So, but I think what you talk about is like this one, like I said, people have different interpretations of what Islamophobia is. On one hand, it's the criticism of Islam, or it's like generally directed at Islam and Muslims, but at Islam itself as an ideology. And then you got this Runnymede Trust guy, Mr. Streeter, running around saying, saying no, it's actually a racist thing because it's just assuming someone, it's just hating someone because of the color of their skin, because that's what Muslims look like. So there's all these different interpretations, and the government want to have their own interpretation, and I've got mine, and I say Islamophobia is just the fear of Muslims because the media made us scared. So I'd say, go with my definition. And that is not necessarily a bad thing, that you are scared, that you have this irrational, because like arachnophobia, I mean, it's irrational, you know, especially if you're British. Arachnophobia in other countries is probably going to save your life, but arachnophobia in the UK, we have no dangerous spiders, man. It's an irrational fear, you know. So Islamophobia might be quite irrational, your fear of Muslims, or there might be rationale behind it. But hatred, no. It's once you start saying it's a racial hatred thing, and because so many people who criticize Islam are labeled as Islamophobes in a very negative way, and that's the path it's going down. For this guy wanted to have his definition and make it like a race hate crime, because he says, oh, there's a very clear definition of what it is. But you'd have to look at the government's one as well and see what the difference is. But still, people can't differentiate between one version of Islamophobia and so it's a subjective term now, isn't it? It's like, well, great, brilliant. You want laws. You want it to be legally recognized when it's apparently subjective now? No. These words and these terms are fucking dangerous for everybody.